Welcome back to another episode of the Be a Paid Speaker Now podcast. I'm Deborah Deras, your host, and my intention, like always, is to help you, the expert, to be a paid speaker. Whether you're going to be paid to speak at conferences or you're going to be paid to speak at virtual conferences or webinars, this podcast is intended to bring you experts that are speakers that are out there in the industry to share their best practices, to share some of the challenges they've had and how they've overcome it, but also to share their expertise, to share their knowledge. And today, let me tell you, you are in for a treat because this is someone that every show I've ever had, I've always had him as a guest because he is just one of my master teachers. He's a coach of mine. He was a practitioner when I was getting my license as a spiritual counselor. He is my brother. He is my friend, and he is your confidant. And you are going to love hearing from him today because it's so timely with everything that's going on in the world. And you are going to love it. So before I get started, if you're listening to this on YouTube or on Facebook, please feel free to share it because you're going to want to get this out because this is going to be a message of peace, a message of hope, and a message of justice for everyone. I am going to introduce you to my friend, Cory Tyler. He is the founder of Confidant International, which provides world-class counseling to clients from Malibu to Abu Dhabi, friend. Mr. Tyler is a practitioner at the Agape International Spiritual Center for 20 years. He looks so young, right? A certified divorce coach and entrepreneur whose life changed when he discovered the world-renowned process called Nonviolent communication. Welcome to the show, Cory. Hi, Shamika.
Thank you for having me on the show, Deborah. I always love being in your presence and learning from you. And hopefully I'll be of inspiration today for anyone listening.
Yeah, so we go way back. I mean, if you've been doing this for 20 years, I think I've known you for 18 or something like that.
We go back to the Agape days.
Yes. I just remember in the early 2000s, I'd be sitting in a circle and my whole world was being turned upside down in a good way, raising consciousness. And you'd always be there and you would say, do you need prayer? Or can I help you? Every single time I would see you. And it's so rare when you live in a world where everybody wants something from you. But something that I appreciate about you, and I don't think I've ever got to say, why not say in front of hundreds of thousands of people, is I so appreciate your giving spirit of always wanting to be of service and to allow people's burdens to be dissolved through your consciousness. And that's so much about your mission and your purpose in the world. Can you just talk about how you got into the field of counseling and how you use your nonviolent communication in the world?
Sure, absolutely. So I was working on staff at the Agape International Spiritual Center. Many of you know Michael Beckwith is the founder and the director there. He's actually godfather to my two sons. And so I was working there in the prayer ministry one day when somebody came to talk about nonviolent communication. And I said to myself, well, wait a minute, I'm not a violent person. Why is this applicable to me? What does this have to do with my life? And then I realized what it really had to do with was how I talked with myself. And at that point, I sort of lived from the standpoint that if you like me, then I like me. So there was this awareness that I came to about how I could change the way that I talked with myself, because there was a lot of judgment. There was a lot of criticism. There were a lot of shoulds. And then I realized that that also had an application for how I talked with others. And it really provided me to redefine my relationship with myself, my relationship with my children, my relationship with the world. And it's a really sweet thing. And it continues on today.
And I love how you talk about the relationship with self, because when you think about nonviolent communication, the first thing that you think about is with others and what are they doing to me and how they're affecting me. And what I hear you saying is that nonviolent communication, it empowers you because then you're at cause rather than at effect of other people. Am I right?
Yes, right on. And a lot of it has to do with, I was wired with this idea of correction. And especially with what's going on in our world today, it's very apparent that there's a lot of pain right now that stems from the idea of what is right and what is wrong. And I don't want to negate that sense of what is right and what's wrong. All I know is when I advance myself from the idea of connecting with someone before correcting them and doing my best to understand their experience and to be heard in terms of my experience, we formulate a connection that can then lead us to solutions.
Oh my God, that's so tweetable. When you said connecting before correcting, I'm a big listener of The Breakfast Club. I don't know if you know The Breakfast Club, show out of New York.
Yeah.
And they had Rush Limbaugh on the show, who's like total opposite end of the spectrum. And they were talking about, white privilege. And he's like, well, I don't believe in white privilege. And they were like, what are you talking? But it was just like, there wasn't, and he said, well, I want to come back. And Charlemagne, who's one of the hosts, said, well, only if we're going to be able to connect, because otherwise you're not. So many times in conversation, I'm sure you deal with this also with couples that are going through a divorce, or you deal with it, one-on-one counseling. People are speaking, but we're not connecting because we're not seeing the other person's point of view. And I almost don't want to post or comment on anything on social media because so many people do not know this nonviolent communication, and they're very defensive and then attacking, and then nobody gets their needs met. And then it leads to violence, right?
Yeah.
So how can you coach all of us to be able to communicate and be more aware so that we can connect rather than correct?
Yeah. So I'd say with what is going on today with the murder of George Floyd and the echoing effects that have unfolded over the last week or so, I would say the first and foremost for me is acknowledgement. Acknowledgement is very liberating for me. And it's not negating what's right or what's wrong. It's merely saying, I'm observing what's taking place. And one of the reasons that I started Confidant International was from this sense of everyone needs someone to talk to.
Right.
And if we don't, then we find other avenues to express that energy. And so one of the things that I do when I work with clients is I say to them, hey, are you angry? Are you feeling rage? Are you feeling hopeless? Are you feeling wonderful? And why I say wonderful is those are natural human emotions. And a lot of times in this world, it's sort of like, nope, let's not get feely touchy. Let's not get into talking about emotions because that implies weakness. Actually, I beg to differ. When I'm in tune with my emotions, I can then acknowledge what's underneath them. It's what I sort of call the jewel in the judgment.
Right.
So I actually encourage people to have judgments because they're going to happen anyway. The next step is acknowledging what's underneath those judgments that's telling me what's important to you. And that's going to be very enlightening and understanding what you're feeling and what you're needing and how we can move forward to where you're feeling, or the person I'm speaking to is feeling like they're more connected to themselves. They're more connected to getting a perspective on things to where they're not stressed out, because a lot of what's going on is metastasized pain right now.
Right.
You go on social media, I'm observing an eruption of pain. Right. An eruption of pain. And it's so important to acknowledge that. So instead of jumping to, well, should this pain be happening? It shouldn't be happening. Let's just acknowledge the fact. I'm acknowledging the fact that it's happening and have some compassion towards that. And that's where the change begins.
And that's what I love about what you teach, from having counseling from you and getting in a session with you. And you're like, well, how do you feel about that? And it's surprising that we may not be aware of how we feel because we're so conditioned not to have those touchy feely emotions. I remember when you first asked me that, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how I feel. And I love how you talk about acknowledgement, because when it comes to this method, there are certain political figures that I see that use this, and it's such a different tone. Like Governor Gavin Newsom, he came on and he said, I understand how people feel. I understand like before he went into like what's happening with the curfew, he acknowledged point this, and institutional racism and systemic oppression and, so many things that you felt as a person that was wounded and ally of people that are wounded. as heard. And that's so
Yeah.
important, because when people do not feel heard, we think that like a child that doesn't feel heard is going to cry and scream, right?
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
what America is doing right now. We're crying and screaming because for decades, voices have not been heard.
Yeah, and I've heard the phrase that protest is the language of the unheard.
Right, right.
And what's very unique about this moment that I believe will beckon some dialogue around this is oftentimes it feels like when things happen like this, it happens in isolation for some people. And for them, it's like watching a show on Netflix where they think it's just one episode. Yet for others, we have the experience of, no, actually, there's 100 episodes. This is a 100 episode series.
Right.
And I mean that with all seriousness of just having some contextual flexibility of being willing to see something differently, even if that's challenging. Right. That's the rub. That's the work right now is, can I have compassion for someone or some empathy for someone that's doing something or going through something I may not agree with? So for me, empathy is not agreement. Empathy is my willingness to make a guess or make a be willing to see what is going on for the other person, regardless of whether I agree with them or not. And that's where the work begins, because otherwise we will continue to perpetuate this dynamic of it's good versus bad. It's right versus wrong. It's should versus shouldn't.
Right. Because it seems like now in our world, even before the pandemic, even before this, there was just like this duality when it came to politics. Like you were either for this or against that. And there was just no way that anyone could meet in the middle and move forward from a this or that or us or them. It just, the whole conversation was about separation. And then the acceleration with the pandemic, staying home, locked in, and with all of this coming up, what can people do to be able to express their fear, frustration, anger without destruction? Because that, I do consulting for small businesses, and my heart was breaking yesterday with the small business owners that were dealing with the ramifications of the looting or the fear that they could never open and that they may never be able to be open. So it's such a difficult time right now because it's like a no-win situation, right?
Yeah. And just to acknowledge, I got you. It seems like that. And I have a lot of compassion for the business owner or the business owners that you spoke with. And I also have compassion for people whose, it's very interesting. Trevor Noah said something the other night that, when we're talking about looting, and he said, the police are looting Black bodies.
I saw that. That was so good, right?
And that really hit me because it just, it's not about placing people on a hierarchy, like these people are suffering more, but these people are suffering less. It's about me acknowledging the mutuality of this language of, ouch, I'm hurting, whether my building is on fire or whether my heart is on fire.
Right.
And so for me, to your suggestion, find a confidant, find somebody that you can talk to unleash, to unpack, to express authentically what's alive in you. And someone who's willing to be a partner and hold space without judgment and with some compassion and is willing to reflect back what they're hearing. That's a lot of what I do with my work, is that sometimes it's not about providing a solution, Deborah. Sometimes it's about, so what I heard you say was you're feeling really frightened and scared because you have a business and you want to make sure you can protect it. And the person will go, yeah, that's it. Just being heard. So I suggest finding a confidant, somebody that you can talk to, whether it's a family member, whether it's a friend, because things like this in our society are not going to go away, and we have to find ways to deal with it in as healthy a way as possible.
Right. And it's important to have somebody that's not maybe your family member or your friend, someone that could be a neutral and compassionate observer like you that could help process the feelings out. Otherwise, it could ignite it. And then, we either implode or we explode if we don't have the tools. I know it myself personally, right? Yeah. So I'll either shut down and get depressed or explode and get super angry. And that doesn't help me, or it doesn't help the situation, whatever that may be. Right.
Yeah. And just acknowledging that happens, acknowledging that my MO is to shut down or to erupt like a volcano. And where do I take that? Where do I take that rage? Where do I take that sadness? And am I willing to accept that I have those feelings? So with the services that I provide a safe space for all of that to come to the surface and for us to address it in a way that acknowledges the pain, provides empathy and compassion, and then we get curious about what's really important to you. What do you value? And what does it look like for you to have a sense of connection with yourself and peace of mind? And it's not easy because this is a practice. This is not a one and done. I've been a part of a class called the Compassion Course, which is starting up in June, and it's masterful. It's actually 52 weeks of practicing these skills of nonviolent consciousness and how do we deal with anger? How do we deal with rage? How do we deal with sadness, which is another deep one? And another thing that I'll also say about this, Deborah, is that usually the feelings of anger and rage are at the top, and underneath them are these really precious needs of expressions of hurt, sadness, disappointment. And they're all important for us to acknowledge. So this is the work that I do. And at a time such as this, it's really important that people are finding an outlet for them to express.
Right.
In a way that's healthy and in a way that doesn't perpetuate violence.
Exactly. Because it's for a long time, and it's funny that I'm a speaker and I wear this. I always wear some blue thing like right at my throat chakra to give me permission to speak my truth. Because when it comes to like teaching or educating or empowering, it's so easy for me to speak up. But as you know, as my counselor, when it comes to like my own needs and a interpersonal relationship, like I'll get quiet and then I'll get angry. And I used to get passive aggressive until I worked with you. And now I'm able to communicate. When you do this, I feel heard. And what I request is, and it's helped me so much in, the years that I've been working with you, like to be able to have that tool, you know what I mean? Because without that, there is just, that withdrawal and that, ineffective communication. So I really, really know that your work is amazing right now. And when it comes to like groups do you do like online webinars or group coaching, or is it just one-on-one type thing?
Yeah, so I basically do one-on-one work. And in those cases, I have clients who may hire me to work not just with them, but with their family members. And so then that gets really yummy and delicious because, as you know, we're tied at the hip with our family. And so it's not just an issue that my one client may have, but it may be an issue that they have with their son-in-law or their daughter. So that's really sweet when I'm able to do that. The group work is essentially through what I shared with you before, which is the Compassion Course. It's compassioncourse.org, and it begins June 24th. And what I love about it is it's an online program where you're able to practice these skills of compassion. And it's a beautiful thing. It's basically what you're able to pay is what they request. So it's really affordable to get into. So there are two options, is working with me one-on-one or working with the Compassion Course. And I'll actually be running a practice group with them this summer as well. So if you sign up at compassioncourse.org, you'll find out how to work with me in some capacity too.
Ooh, that's so fantastic. It's like the perfect time for it too, right?
Oh, completely. So another thing that I want to say is the default is fight, flight, or freeze.
Right.
That's how we're wired. That's how I'm wired as a human being. And so I don't want to sit here and act like, oh, when you are practicing these skills, you're sitting on top of a hill and you're levitating and nothing ever bothers you, because I would be talking out the side of my neck. I would be lying to you. This practice is about embracing humanity. And right now, I can be very honest with you. I have moments of rage. I have moments of anger. I have moments of deep frustration with what's going on. And that's not always pretty. And a lot of times it's messy. But what this work does is it's able to hold the messiness. So even if I slip up and I get angry sometimes and I say something that I regret, I can always come back and say to myself, wow, that didn't go well. I'm regretting that. I'm regretting that I said what I said when I did what I did. So there's a really a a repair function with this work. And that's not to give anybody license to go out and do X, Y, Z, and then to say, oh, well, I'll just mourn it, or I'll just, say some nice words. What I'm saying here is that I recognize the humanity,
Right.
and I recognize the pain that we're experiencing collectively. And right now there's a lot of discord. And so what is helpful for me is to know that my humanity is welcome in this work.
Yeah, and that's what I love about it. I remember hearing Panache Desai say once, we find our divinity through our humanity. And his first book is literally about every chapter is an emotion. And it's giving yourself permission as a spiritual person to feel anger, to feel sadness. It's just like we need to have that. That as human beings, it's natural. We're not robots. To be compassionate, to be empathetic. And a lot of people that I know, and I'm sure that you know, we're very empathetic. And so right now, everything that's going on in the world is affecting us deeply. I mean, going from crying to being so angry that our brothers and sisters are being killed and that nothing is happening. It's like, it's maddening. And it's really important that we have an outlet like that course that you're teaching, the compassionate course, the one-on-one with you, to be able to release it. And that we also have the words to be able to speak to our governors, our senators, our legislatures and say, this is not acceptable. And to be able to really speak our requests so that we can get it done. Like, what is our request right now? Okay, we want these other 4 officers to be arrested. Or what is it that we want? What is it that we're needing in order for it to move us forward and to feel a little bit better?
And so that's the beauty of it, is when I'm able to get in touch with what's important to me, and I use the word value, I can use the word need. What comes up for me is justice, integrity, consideration, understanding, connection. And when I'm in that space, I can start moving towards, okay, well, what are some strategies that could look like me meeting those needs versus just being filled with all of this energy and saying, this has got to happen and that has got to happen. And I'm disconnected from myself and I'm disconnected from others. Another thing that I'll say that is really a passion about all of this going on right now is I'm mindful of what I digest digitally.
Yes, friend.
I'm mindful of how much news I ingest, what kind of news I ingest. And I'm not talking about being Pollyannish and just not looking at what is going on. It's important to see it, but there's a difference between being informed and being inundated.
Exactly.
So for me, it's about being mindful of my digital diet as well, because that also stokes the fire.
Right. Oh my God, I'm so glad that you said that, because when we had first started the pandemic, and also when we first got a new president, I had to go on a fast from the news for a while, and then when we started having curfews, I was like, well, I need to know what exactly is going on so that, so there's a balance of it, but I could definitely feel my emotions and my energy draining to the degree that I was watching television. So my televisions right now are connected to my laptops and they're like monitors. I'm telling a vision of my own life with the podcast, with all of the webinars that I do, but it's still important because, the phrase, until all of us are free, none of us are free. Right. Yeah. And that this is not a Black person issue. This is every human issue. Right. Mm-hmm. We need to, all of us, to be speaking up, to be standing up, to be making these requests, because it is imperative and our voices have to be spoken now. And you give us the way to be able to do that in a productive way. That's like the Martin Luther King way, that's going to lead us to the equality, justice for all people, not just for some elite people, for everyone. It's so very, very important.
This is a journey we're collectively on, Deborah. Right. And I think in the past, it might have been easy for one to think that I can compartmentalize my life and I can kind of live here. Right. And these other things are going on around me and they don't affect me. We don't have that luxury anymore.
No.
And so it's my hope that people find healthy resources and ways to express themselves so that we can move forward together versus being divided.
Amen. Amen. in, Cory. So how can they stay in touch with you? Compassion Course, and what is the other website? Oneconfident.com?
Yes. So I'm actually offering some complimentary sessions. And so if people want to take me up on that, they can do so by going to confidant.youcanbook.me. Confidant.youcanbook.me. And I'd be happy to connect with people and provide some help if they're going through something right now that's challenging. And then once again, compassioncourse.org. It begins June 24th. This is the perfect time because it's about making peace. It's about making connection. It's about making honesty a practice. And this is something that I've actually taken 5 years. I've taken the class myself for 5 years. So wow. I'm evidence that it's important to really commit oneself to learning a language where I can be more connected to myself, so that when things like this happen in the world, because things like this are going to happen in the world, how is it that I'm communicating with myself? How is it, therefore, that I'm communicating with my children? How is it that I'm communicating with the world?
I love it. Thank you so much. We need you right now more than ever. And I'm so grateful to have you as my confidant and friend and brother, and knowing that, this is a time for synergy, that, together we can really create an impact, but we have to be a we, not an us versus them. For many years as a professor, I taught a class called diversity. And I told the students that inherent in that term diversity is die and separation. So we're not going to call it diversity. We're going to call it inclusivity. And that's what you are creating with this compassion course. And it starts with ourselves. So when we know how to dialogue with our own negative self-talk, then we can dialogue with people in our families, in our circles, and then we can bring that out into the world. So it all starts within. It's the I-N, inclusivity, within the inner work. That.
Right? And I want to take a moment to acknowledge you, Deborah, because as long as I've known you, you have just been steadfast in your passion of sharing things with people that is going to add to their lives. Yeah. And it's going on a number of years. And I have a lot of admiration for your tenacity. And I just wanted to share that with you for those that are listening, that Deborah is, she's committed to this work, and it's beautiful to see.
I am. Thank you so much. And thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Be a Paid Speaker Now podcast. Like Cory said, my whole mission is to help you, the expert, to be abundantly paid, to do what you love, to use your talent, skills, and abilities. And now is the time more than ever to have an online course. If any of you have been considering creating an online course, I have one on being a paid speaker. It's called the Be a Paid Speaker Now Academy. You can get a 28-day free trial to Kajabi. That's the course program that I use. And if you go to the Be a Paid Speaker Now podcast.com, you're going to see an episode of this, because you're going to want to listen to Cory over and over and over again, just to hear his voice and to feel a little bit more calm, inspired, and empowered. And I have a link where you can click on and get a 28-day free trial for Kajabi. Try it out. See if you want to start your online program. And I'm here to support you in coaching to get it out there, because truly, I believe that you are a messenger for a very important message. And now is the time to speak up, to speak out, and to be able to teach what you're passionate about, and also to be able to make a living to do that. So thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure that you give it 5 stars on iTunes. If you listen to it on iTunes, you share it on your social media, you like it, you comment, you tell me who you want the next guest, because this is all for you. And remember that with the power of synergy, anything is possible. Ciao.